Cancer is far more common than people realize. About 40% of us will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in our lifetime. And on one hand, a lot of the risk is just genetics and bad luck. But on the other hand, studies show that up to 40% of cancers in women and 57% of cancers in men may be preventable. Now, what does that mean? Well, you can't change your genetics, but you can influence how your genes behave. And one of the strongest levers you can pull to lower your risk of cancer is the foods that you eat or don't eat every day. Because cancer is not just a genetic disease, it's also a metabolic disease and an inflammatory disease. And in many ways, it's environmental. So the conditions inside your body matter: your hormones, your level of inflammation, and what kind of fuels your cells are exposed to. And this is the part that often gets missed. Even foods that seem normal or even healthy can push your body towards the exact conditions that cancer cells thrive in. So, in this video, I want to walk you through specific foods that shape this internal environment, and I want to break down the science behind how they support or slow down cancer growth. And I'll give you a simple framework to help you shift things in the right direction, one that makes it much more difficult for cancer cells to take hold and grow in the first place. And along the way, we'll take a closer look at red meat and how you should approach it because it's one of the most debated foods in the space, and the data there is far more nuanced than headlines make it seem. And if you're new to this channel, I'm Dr. Rayn. I'm a double-board certified physician, and on this channel, I go over the most up-to-date and evidence-based information on metabolic health and longevity. Let's get into it. So, let's start with one of the most underestimated drivers of cancer risk, and that is sugar-sweetened beverages. And this one is tricky. Everyone knows about sodas, but then there's energy drinks, and there's juices, and sweetened coffee, and boba teas. These drinks deliver massive amounts of sugar into the bloodstream almost instantly. And we have large population studies that show that every additional 8 oz drink of 100% fruit juice per day is associated with a 17% increase in breast cancer risk, and a 10% increase in colorectal cancer risk, and a whopping 30% increased risk in the cancers of the biliary tract. So that refers to cancers of the gallbladder and the bile ducts, the small tubes that connect the liver to the intestines. And sugary drinks have also been linked to cancer of the liver and the pancreas, oral cavity, and prostate. Now, these studies show associations, so not proof of causation. But if you look at what's happening biologically, this lines up pretty well. And it starts with something called the Warburg effect. Most healthy cells generate energy very efficiently using oxygen to slowly extract energy from nutrients. But cancerous cells often behave very differently. Many switch to a faster metabolic pathway, where they just burn through glucose extremely rapidly even when oxygen is available. Think of it like an engine stuck at a full throttle. Cancer cells are constantly demanding fuel so they can divide and grow, and their preferred fuel is glucose. And there's another layer. When we consume large amounts of sugar, our body releases hormones like insulin and IGF-1, which act as growth signals. Many cancer cells have far more insulin receptors than normal cells. In fact, some breast cancer cells have 6 to 10 times more insulin receptors than normal healthy cells. When insulin levels remain chronically elevated, hyperinsulinemia, the body is essentially bathing cells in growth signals, which can accelerate abnormal cell growth. This is why liquid sugar is especially concerning. It delivers large glucose loads without fiber or satiety, pushing the body into that cancer-promoting metabolic environment. And there's another issue with sweet beverages, especially fruit juices: inorganic arsenic exposure. Arsenic is classified as a Group 1 carcinogen. It can damage DNA and disrupt gene regulation. Arsenic has been linked to lung, bladder, and some skin cancers. The American Cancer Society specifically lists fruit juice, and especially apple juice, among foods to avoid consuming excessively due to possible arsenic contamination. Other foods to worry about are rice products. White rice is usually lower in arsenic than brown rice, and there are ways to reduce exposure even further. One trick is to soak rice in water overnight and rinse it thoroughly before cooking. These simple steps can meaningfully reduce arsenic exposure. But sugary beverages are really just one part of a larger pattern: the rise of ultra-processed foods, heavily industrialized and made from refined ingredients. This includes packaged snacks, fast food, processed desserts, and many frozen meals. They're engineered to be extremely palatable, making it hard to stop eating them. Large population studies show that for every 10% increase in ultra-processed food intake, your overall cancer risk goes up by 13%. And for colorectal cancer, the fastest growing cancer in young people today, their risk goes up by 30%. Again, the biology behind it makes sense. First, these foods drive rapid blood sugar spikes. Second, they promote chronic low-grade inflammation, which weakens your immune system's defense against abnormal cells. Third, these foods can disrupt the gut microbiome. Emulsifiers used for texture can damage the intestinal barrier and promote inflammation, worsening your gut health. Then there's the food displacement paradigm. The more ultra-processed foods we eat, the less room there is for protective whole foods like fiber and phytochemicals. These are important for immune cells to function properly and protect us against cancer. The problem is not just one ingredient, it's the overall dietary environment. Another category we must discuss is heavily salted or pickled foods. Certain preserved foods high in salt have been linked to an increased risk of stomach cancer. High salt concentrations can damage the stomach lining and promote chronic inflammation, making the stomach more vulnerable to cancer-promoting compounds. Studies show people with high salt intake have about a 68% higher risk of gastric cancer compared to people with lower intake. Some of these preserved foods also contain nitrosamines, which are known to damage DNA. This is why stomach cancer is historically more common in regions like East Asia. Next is the controversial category, processed and red meat. We must approach this carefully as the science is not as black and white as headlines suggest. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies processed meat, bacon, sausage, deli meats as a Group 1 carcinogen. The American Cancer Society reports that each additional 2 ounces of processed meat per day increases colorectal cancer risk by about 23%. Processed meats are also linked to higher risks of other cancers, including breast, lung, esophagus, and prostate cancers. But there's an important distinction. Processed meat and red meat are often lumped together, but the data is very different, and we shouldn't approach them the same way. A recent review showed processed meats consistently show more harmful effects compared to unprocessed red meats, suggesting processing may matter just as much as the food itself. Processed meats often contain nitrites and nitrates. In the stomach's acidic environment, they form nitrosamines like NDMA, known carcinogens that damage DNA. With unprocessed red meat, the link is weaker. It's classified as a Group 2A carcinogen, meaning there's limited human evidence but strong biological plausibility. In 2019, a review suggested that reducing meat intake had only small effects with low certainty evidence, causing significant debate in the nutritional space. The American Cancer Society responded, pointing out that the review focused heavily on randomized controlled trials and placed less weight on observational studies. There are 2 main types of studies. Randomized controlled trials isolate one variable to give strong cause and effect data, but they are hard to do for cancer. You would need to control people's diets for 20 or 30 years with perfect adherence, which is realistically just not possible. This is where observational studies come in. They follow hundreds of thousands of people for decades looking at patterns. The strength is scale and time, but the limitation is you can't control everything. People who eat more red meat may also eat fewer vegetables, and nutritional research often relies on food diaries, which can be inaccurate. You're always balancing the two. RCTs give stronger cause and effect in short timelines. Observational studies give real-world data with more bias. We must look at both to make the best prediction. Is there a link between red meat and cancer? Absolutely. But it's not just about the meat itself. It's also about what's missing from the diet. Fiber. Fiber is a strong protective factor. It regulates blood sugar and feeds gut bacteria that produce butyrate, which reduces inflammation and supports colon health. A study in the British Journal of Nutrition showed eating 300 grams of red meat per day increased DNA damage markers by 21%. But then, something interesting happened. When researchers added 40 grams of resistant starch, a type of fiber, the increase in DNA damage markers completely disappeared, returning to baseline. You can get resistant starch from whole foods like potatoes, legumes, and green bananas. This suggests the effect of red meat depends heavily on your overall diet. My takeaway is a nuanced approach. Red meat every day is likely not a good idea, but once or twice a week, paired with fiber-rich foods, has much less risk evidence. One more layer, how meat is cooked. Grilling, frying, or barbecuing at high temperatures can form harmful compounds like heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. You can reduce this by pre-cooking your meat before grilling to limit high heat exposure. Using marinades with herbs, garlic, or vinegar also helps limit these compounds. Avoid sugary marinades that char quickly. Choosing leaner cuts means less dripping, less smoke, and fewer harmful compounds on the meat. I hope this was helpful. Stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Type yes in the comments if you're taking control of your metabolic health today.